Hello everyone. If you are new to the channel, my name is Matt and I am the tournament organizer at Liberty MTG. So last night we had a digital Friday Night Magic tournament. It was casual. We had a couple people streaming it, a couple of people recording their matches, and the reason I say it's casual is because I can't really enforce a no outside assistance rule. That was in the comment section last week from our videos. So there's no way for me to enforce that. People could be helping each other, through Discord or stream sniping, stuff like that. That's why it's casual. I can't enforce rules like that. Obviously, there's nothing I can do about it. So we organized the tournament through our Discord server and on AetherHub for the pairings, and then we played the matches out through direct challenges on MTG Arena. So I played Grixis Fires last night, and if you've been following the channel for a while, I've been playing this since the card was printed. I really like Fires of Invention because it's a good card, but it does have drawbacks to it. So it is the namesake card in the deck, and it says you can cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. And you can cast spells with converted mana costs less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana costs. So one thing that's worth noting is that you can cast things at instant speed on your turn, but without counter spells in the deck, you're probably not going to be doing that anyways. So the idea of this deck is it's kind of like a tap out control deck in the beginning, and then it's more of like a grindy mid range deck in the end. So it's kind of a combination of mid range and control. And there are a lot of decisions to make, which is why I like the deck a lot. It's got a lot of versatility with the sideboard, which we'll show you in a second. So it has a pretty good matchup up against a lot of the field. So go over the cards in it. There are 4 Fae of Wishes. I realize my webcam's kind of covering that up. Oh well. So a lot of times what you're going to do is cast Granted and find a Fires of Invention from your sideboard. Um, so there are 3 fires in the main deck, 1 fires in the sideboard. And that gives you kind of 7 ways to draw it in the beginning of the game without having to, dedicate all 4 of them to the main deck. And then Fae of Wishes is also relevant because as a 1/4 for 2, it blocks really well against mono red or some of the Gruul decks, and it gives you a way to later in the game, if you're drawing a lot of extra lands, you can discard them to pick the Fae back up, cast Granted again, and find something you need. I was experimenting with Croxes. There's 2 in the main deck. Originally, when I was playtesting, I had 4 in here, and it's actually extremely hard to cast it from the graveyard for its escape cost. So I'm down to 2. I do like the card because it functions as a win condition, but I don't think I actually used it to attack with. So it may or may not belong in the deck, I guess is what I'm getting at. Worth noting is that you can't escape it for free using fire, so you have to pay the mana cost. And that's why it's so difficult, because having double red and double black is actually pretty hard. And then on top of that, you have to have 5 other cards in the graveyard. So in the old Grixis list, I was using Shimmer of Possibility for my card drawing, card selection, and I've replaced it with Omen of the Sea, and I think Omen's just better. Um, one, you can cast it on their turn with flash, and 2, like, it effectively sees the same number of cards. You're going to look at least 4 cards using it, but it's just better than Shimmer because you can use your mana late game to sacrifice it and scry 2. And of course, with Fires of Invention, casting spells for free, you're going to have mana, so having Omen as a mana sink late game is actually really good. For Disruption, there's 4 Thought Erasures, and again, if you've been following the channel for a while, I tend to draw a lot of lands or have really bad draws, so I really appreciate the Surveil on this card. It can set you up for finding the lands you need or finding the fires. There could be an argument made, I've got 2 Agonizing Remorse in the sideboard, that you want some combination of Agonizing Remorse and Thought Erasure in the main deck. I guess that'll be dependent on your metagame. The Remorse is probably better for, like, against Uro or against other cards that need to be hit from the graveyard. So that could be up to you. I like the 4 Thought Erasures. Then I've got 2 Tyrant Scorns for early removal. You could also return creatures to hands if you just can't find a removal spell for them and they're larger than 3 CMC. Then I've got 4 Murderous Riders. Obviously, a good removal spell can hit planeswalkers and it can hit creatures. Nissa's very problematic, so I usually keep a removal spell in hand just in case, if I'm playing against green player, just in case they do draw a Nissa. And then against like a mono red or a Gruul deck, having a 2/3 with lifelink is pretty good by itself. Then there is one Cry of the Carnarium, and that's just for mono red. I like Eat to Extinction as a card. It's a great follow-up if you have a turn 4 fires and then just immediately use the Eat to Extinction to hit something else. That's really good. And then you've got Surveil 1 on it, so you're able to find a 5th land drop or find a Bolus or something to follow it up with the next turn. And then there are 2 Ritual of Soots, again for the aggro matchups like Gruul or Mono Red. I guess that's also relevant against cats too. 3 Nicol Bolas. Had him at 2 in the main deck, and I just kept wanting more. It's such a good card. Obviously, it functions as card advantage. You draw a card and they have to exile something. It can, kill a creature or a planeswalker. And the number of games I've won with the -8 is more than you'd think, because of the passive ability, being able to use any other planeswalker abilities, which we'll get to. You got Chandra. So when you can follow up a Nicol Bolas with a Chandra and then just +2 the Nicol Bolas a couple times, you're already at 8. Obviously, Chandra's in the deck because she's a good card. Can't be countered, so it's good against control matchups or the Simic Flash decks. The +2 can end games pretty quickly, and when you have a Nicol Bolas and a Chandra, giving 2 emblems every turn is brutal. The -3 obviously acts as a board wipe if you can make it to 6 mana against a aggro deck. And then the -X is great because you can exile the creatures with it. So like Uro, if she's got more than 6 counters on her, you can exile the Uro without losing your Chandra, which is nice. It could exile, really anything that's going to come back and be a problem. It can exile Planeswalkers too, which is relevant against Elspeth Conquer's Deaths, so they can't reanimate it. And then I have 2 Lilianas. I was running just one, and I felt like I was a little light on win conditions, so I put the second one in. Obviously, you can make zombie armies, and the -4 is a great removal spell. And then you can refill your hand with zombie tokens dying too, or I suppose Murderous Rider dying or a Fae of Wishes dying. If you actually get to the -9, it's pretty backbreaking for the opponent, and you're probably just going to win because of that. So moving on to the lands. So with the Fires of Invention, you're casting spells for free, and you're going to have a lot of lands sitting on your battlefield not being used. So we've got 3 Castle Vantress. Sometimes 3 feels like too many because you keep drawing them, and 2 never feels like enough. So the correct number is probably 2.5. So what you're going to do is basically use your lands, your mana, to scry 2 and control your draw steps. Now you can do it on your opponent's end step, and you could also set a stop for your upkeep and scry before your draw step. So you have the ability to look at potentially 4 cards before you draw your card for the turn. There's 6 basics in the deck. You've got 1 island, 4 swamps, and 1 mountain. And the reason for 4 swamps as opposed to like an even split is just Nicol Bolas costing 3 black. So if you don't draw fires, you have to have a lot of black mana to actually cast the Nicol Bolas. Scroll down a little here. So we've got 1 Temple of Deceit and 1 Temple of Malice just to have a little bit of scry. They're great on turn 1. And to be honest, once you have fires in play, your lands coming in tapped is not really an issue. So it's fine. Then you've got 4 of each shock land, so 4 Watery Grave, 4 Steam Vents, 4 Blood Crypts, and then 3 Fabled Passage to fix your mana, and also put cards in the graveyard for Kroxa. So the main deck is pretty straightforward. You're basically trying to answer threats and grind them out with card advantage. What makes it a lot of fun is casting Granted and having to make decisions about what you grab from the sideboard. So we've got 2 Agonizing Remorse, 2 Cry of the Carnarium. I added 1 Ashiok last night, and that was a phenomenal card. Every time I play it against Uro decks, it feels great. I was able to get rid of an Oketra. Once they tucked it into the library, I played the Ashiok and milled it and exiled it, so that was nice. And it's not irrelevant that you can turn off people's Fabled Passages with it. Then we've got 1 Ritual of Soot, just another board wipe against aggro decks. The 1 Fires of Invention, so you can grab it with the Fae of Wishes, the Granted, and cast it. What you'll probably end up doing is casting Granted on 4 if you're not really under a lot of pressure, and then just casting the fires and hopefully you have a follow up on turn 5. If it gets to the point in the late game and you still haven't found a fires, it can be hard to find a spot where you cast a Granted and a fires in the same turn. So you kind of have to determine, what you can afford to play. Then we've got 1 Elspeth Conquers Death. Obviously a great card. It's seeing a lot of play. And you've got, 6 Planeswalkers that could potentially all die. So pulling them back into play is great. 1 time wipe, again, removals or a board wipe for the aggro matchups. The 4th Nicol Bolas because he's the best Planeswalker. Sometimes like you have the fires on 4, you Granted for the Nicol Bolas and play it on 5. That's really good. Then you've got 1 Planar Cleansing, and that is pretty good against the cat matchup because it gets rid of all of the Witch's Ovens, the food tokens, obviously other creatures. So I haven't really played against cats a lot, but that's what it's there for. The 1 Thought Distortion, this felt like I needed it against Azorius Control, but in the past couple weeks I really haven't played against it, so it might come out and get replaced, but that's what it's there for. One thing people forget is that it exiles everything from their hand and graveyard, so it hits spells in the graveyard. It doesn't hit creatures in the graveyard. So against Elspeth Conquers Deaths, recurring planeswalkers, it's effective at that, and obviously can't be countered. The 2nd Chandra in the sideboard, good against control matchups. And then MVP here, Casualties of War. This card is brutal. You grab it on 6 with a Granted and cast it, and you can usually get a 3-for-1 out of it. If you get a 4-for-1 or better, great. A lot of people will just concede right to it. And there's a second one because you cast the Fae of Wishes, you pick it back up, you Granted for a 2nd Casualties, and it's rough to come back from that. So in terms of sideboarding, you don't really want to do a lot of sideboarding. I would recommend pulling out the dead cards in the matchups. So a lot of times I'm pulling out Cry of the Carnarium if I'm not playing against aggro. Most of the time you don't touch the main deck, to be honest. Against Uro, I'll usually put in the 2 Agonizing Remorses and take out, something like a Ritual Soot or a Tyrant Scorn maybe. But other than that, you don't really want to put anything into the main deck. Very light sideboarding. You're really just trying to focus on, Castle Vantressing to get your card selection, and then casting spells for free. Now, one thing that's worth noting too is that you obviously want to hit your 6th land drop, because then you're going to be casting your planeswalkers for free, your casualties for free. You don't usually want to go beyond that. The 7th land drop is okay because you'd be able to Vantress and pick up a Fae of Wishes using the 7 mana, but for the most part, keep 1 land in your hand because you want useless cards to pick the Fae of Wishes back up. So that is kind of like most people will just draw land and play it, draw land and play it, and this is a deck where you actually kind of want to hold lands. Other than that, the deck is a lot of fun. Like I said, there's a lot of decisions. You can tweak the sideboard to fit your metagame a little bit better. It's basically a wishboard deck. You don't change much in the main deck. You sideboard, or you wish the stuff out of the sideboard into the match, and yeah. So I've been playing this deck the last couple days. I played it last night for our Friday Night Magic tournament. I'm not going to spoil my results. I haven't had much success with any other deck but this one, which is kind of funny. I've tried, Simic, I've tried Bant, I've tried Sultai, I've tried everything in the metagame right now, and I just can't seem to get good win ratio with it, or with those decks, and then the Grixis deck I do a lot better with. And maybe it's because I played this for an entire season, so I'm a lot more familiar with it, but that's what it is. So anyways, hopefully I've explained this pretty well, and thank you for watching.